13 books read in May. Let's get into it. Also, I did my nails to match one of my best books of the month. Can you guess what they are before we get to the book? It's not my very best of the month, so you can't just like cheat and look at the chapter titles. Okay, once again, let's talk about these in order from my least favorite to my most favorite. And this will range from a 2-star all the way to a 5-star. Unfortunately, my least favorite of the month was an arc, The Summer Fun Massacre by Craig DiLouie. I did a full review of this. I believe it might be out now, but if not, then I will have the release date in the video or in the description. This was pitched as a summer camp slasher. However, as I discussed in my full review video, it really doesn't deliver on that. In the author's note at the end, Craig DeLuey describes it that he wanted to write a story that was from the point of view of the well-meaning cop that appears in something like a summer camp slasher movie or a slasher movie, someone like Dewey from Scream. That I think should have been the pitch, and then readers would come into it with the right expectations, I think, because whenever you read this book, the slasher has already happened. Like the summer camp massacre has already happened. You do get like a little flashback where you see it, but if what you were looking for is the experience of watching a summer camp slasher movie, then I think that you will be disappointed. And I'm okay with my expectations being changed in a story. Like, I don't need it to be exactly what I thought it was going to be. Like, I appreciate a different take on a slasher, although I would love to read more that really feel like watching a horror movie. However, the cop that is at the center of this was just not interesting to me. He wasn't doing any interesting detective work. He really didn't have any characterization, and a lot of the book, most of the book, was spent just at the police station talking with other cops who really didn't have any characterization either, that there was no way that they were differentiated from each other. It was about the politics of who was going to be the next sheriff, who was going to be the next police chief, and that I just didn't care about. And there were so many more interesting ideas that were living on the periphery. I loved the idea of this folk horror element, this ritualistic returning of a summer camp massacre that is afflicting this town every once in a while, and this folk horror character of the hungry hare, this guy wearing like a rabbit mask that is doing all of these things, and that's what, there's always one survivor, and they talk about this and no one believes them. And I just felt like that wasn't really given the page time that it deserved, because it was the most interesting part of the story. There's about 5 pages in the beginning and 5 pages at the end of the story that really deliver on a summer camp slasher, Summerween kind of vibe, or the folk horror character. And the rest of it is just like kind of boring police chatter. Like it just didn't do anything for me. So unfortunately, that is a 2-star. And it's the first book that I've read by Craig DeLuey, but I am willing to give him another shot because I think that this was just a miss, because I don't really love reading police point of view novels at the best of times. And then on to my 3 stars, Exit 8 by Genki Kawamura. I will have to put the translator up on the screen because I did not write that down. Genki Kawamura wrote and directed the Exit 8 film as well. I am not someone who's like reading every kind of novelization. However, Exit 8 is also originally a video game. So the movie was an adaptation, and so the novel, interestingly, I think was like an adaptation coinciding with the movie, not really like a novelization of a horror movie exactly. But Genki Kawamura is an author that I've read from before. If all the cats, if cats disappeared from the world, something like that. It was not a horror novel by any means. Just like a very like, what I remember, kind of like sweet and contemplative novel about cats. Exit 8, however, is in the vein of the moment in horror about liminal space horror. And this one sets place and this one takes place in a Japanese subway station where it just continues forever, and you're looking for exit 8. You are this like main character, and he's having to spot the anomalies that are in this endless train station. A much better liminal space train station book than coup de grace that I read last month. So kind of interesting to just like coincidentally read those back to back. But the anomalies are interesting. It's like there's certain posters on the wall that need to look exactly the same every time, and if they look the same every time, then you keep walking. If they don't, you turn around and run back if the eyes appear to be following you on the posters, or if the Japanese like salaryman guy walking through, if he's smiling, turn around. If he looks neutral, keep going. There's a weird photo booth that's there, and there's photos that are being printed, and wait, they're of him, and it's like, what is going on? And I did feel like, although I've only seen a little bit of the game, I think I get the gist of the game. I have not yet seen the movie, and I did feel like, like, I don't know that it would add a ton if you saw the movie. However, it was written really genuinely as a novel that stood on its own merit. You could totally read this book and never plan to watch the movie or play the video game, and it would make sense. I think it can stand on its own in that way, and like the ways that he was thinking about what was going on was something that couldn't necessarily be represented in the video game or in the movie. That it was a lot about the internal monologue that he had about figuring out what was going on, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Wasn't something that like I would rave about or anything, but I think if you are someone who is like looking for more liminal horror books, you might want to pick it up. It's interesting. Or if you're really interested in a train station book, it is all set in a single train station. Hey, I also have another train station book coming up. The next book, a surprise 3-star for me, Bodies of Work by Clay McLeod Chapman. This was unfortunately my least favorite Clay McLeod Chapman. I am a known Clay McLeod Chapman stan. I have really enjoyed everything that I've read from him, and this was not bad. Bodies of Work, which is about these women that are the victims of a senior man serial killer who, for his paintings, for his art, he is killing these women, like using their spirits, their essences, to make these works pop. I think part of it was I did not get on well with like the style of the audiobook, that all of the voices of each of these women were indistinct from each other, that they were all this like fawning childlike voice that I don't think I would have put onto the book, and I think I would have gotten a different kind of vibe if I was reading it with my eyeballs, but that's not what happened. I don't think it would be a 5-star read for me if I had read it with my eyeballs, but I do think that I probably would have more of a positive experience from it. So I don't necessarily recommend the audiobook because it is one of those ones where they're telling you how to feel. They're telling you so much about, like, there's just so much acting being done, which works sometimes really well. But for this, it was the same degree of fervor of, it was really one note, and I didn't like the note that was on. Like, there was no ebbs and flows to it. I didn't really get to differentiate any of them, and so it was kind of just like an amorphous mess for me. I don't know. It's really interesting because it's also a short work, and I've loved his novels and I've loved his short stories. I don't know if it was mostly the audiobook experience that I just didn't get on with, and so I couldn't really connect with it, or what. But yeah, my least favorite of it. If I, you know what, maybe I'll eventually do a tier list. And so yeah, there's got to be something at the bottom in order for the other things to sparkle in your mind, and I don't know what I would have considered my least favorite before now. So yeah, unfortunately kind of a miss for me, but I'll still read every single thing that he writes. Okay, next was Hellphone by Benji Nate, which was the first volume of a graphic novel series, and I think it's the only one out. And it's published by Silver Sprocket, which is a cool indie comic publisher. I've read a few of their publishings on ebook now, which, reading a graphic novel on your phone is not ideal, but Hellphone was so cute. I loved the art style. I really got on with it. Hellphone is about these two best friends, and they're both kind of like aimless a little bit in life. Like, it kind of has a Ghost World vibe to the girls' relationships to each other. And one day they find a phone that is speculative in nature, that they get calls from kind of beyond the grave, and they have to figure out what to do about these calls they're getting, that it leads them to a building where there's a body, but then they go back later, they try to show it to someone and there's nothing there. And so it's a little bit of this mystery, and this volume is really just kind of setting up the world. It's hard to recommend this as like a standalone. Yeah, check it out now. You will see if you like the art style and the humor of it. However, there wasn't really a lot of meat to the story of the first volume. It was really about just setting the groundwork for later. So, you can't really rate it above a 3-star, I guess. At least I won't, if I don't feel like there's any like real story yet. But really enjoyed it. And we'll definitely be looking out for future volumes. And I love to have a graphic novel kind of thing to look forward to. Next is The Compound by Aisling Rawle, which is like a Hunger Games meets Love Island, and that premise sounds really fun, and it was like a really entertaining, fun read. You're following this main character who is there's something dystopian going on outside of this compound. However, she's going into this experience at this compound. She knows it's all televised. It's something that people love. However, they're not able to see the previous season that happened, which makes you feel like, oh, something really bad could have happened. But it's like each set of contestants, there's eventually a winner, and they get everything they want, and they get to live in this compound away from the dystopian world for as long as they want, getting all of their wishes granted. And then as soon as they decide to leave, they leave, and a new set of villagers enter the island, or the desert compound, as it were. Really fun, really entertaining, but it ended up being a mid read for me because for some reason it decided to open with like an Animal Farm quote about the horses and the ribbons, and you think it's going to be like this like commentary, some class politics and discussion. However, that is like not broached at any point in the story. You can extrapolate your own ideas about it, but it's just like so odd to open with a quote that's specifically about class politics and communism and capitalism. And then we enter this world. We know that there's bad circumstances going on the outside, but you never really find out what. Contestants on the compound are also not able to ask each other questions about their personal life, but at some point they do get to, and it never becomes a topic of conversation. The idea of class, like what is driving all of these people to really want to be part of this compound? It puts them all on a very even playing field, purely because they decide to not talk about anything, that the book decides not to talk about anything, that you don't see any class differences between these characters and their motivations. It's just like, are they good or bad, and do they like me or do they not like me? Will they like me after I'm out of the compound or whatever? It just like, it could have done so much more with the premise, and with, I think, must have been the original intention of the book to be more about class politics, but then I don't know what happened because they're not in the book. So it ends up being really weak. I think that if it didn't open with that quote, and no, I still would have been annoyed, because it's like, it's okay to not know what's going on the outside, but it is of interest. It would be of interest to these characters. So whenever they are able to talk to each other about stuff, why would it not be a topic of conversation. Next, one of the most hyped books lately, 5 by Ilona Bannister. Yeah, this was a 3-star read for me. I don't really understand why this has become a thriller that is so highly discussed and popular. I was wanting to even buy it physically because I've wanted to read a good thriller for a while now, and there just hasn't been anything that caught my eye. However, this one, like, so many people were talking about it like it was the best thriller ever and like the thriller of the year. And I could not bring myself to buy the Australian cover because, like, what is this? It is so ugly. And I can say with confidence that it's not just ugly on first glance, but it is nothing to do with the story. Like, what is this? I don't know. Anyway, the whole thing is set on a train station, and it has this meta fourth wall breaking element where it talks directly to the reader, and it says in 5 minutes one of these 5 people on waiting for the train at the train station is going to die. And yeah, there's no getting out of it. One of them's going to die. So let me tell you about them and set the scene for you. And you see this scene kind of setting out on the train station, but then what it does is it takes you out of the train station and it tells you like the life events of these 5 people leading up to them being at the train station. And I mean, part of, talking about it would be spoilers, but I mean, it is like just about these 5 people, and one of them is going to die at the end. And really, the idea of the book, there would be no spoiler except for telling you which one of them died, but it's more so about like, well, who did you think deserved to die, or who were you rooting for one of these people to die? Did you feel like one of them deserved it more than the other? All 5 of these people have gone through some traumatic stuff. Like, none of their lives are easy, and they've all done bad things. They've all done they've all had ways that you'd be sympathetic towards them, but all of their lives are a mess. And so it's one of those, like, almost like gotcha things where it's like, did you think that someone deserved to die? Were you hoping it was this person because maybe you're evil? And just like a kind of smug tone to it that I just didn't get on with. A book that I think does this better is one that I read last month, The 7 Moons of Molly Almeida, which is kind of the same thing, except it's not so um straightforward. It's a much more nuanced thing where it's like Molly's trying to figure out why he died. And, it kind of puts the reader in position of thinking like, or is one of these, would one of these reasons bring a more noble death? What is a good life? What is a good death? And that's what 5 is about, but I feel like just very unnuanced. And it really just wants you to be put through the trauma of each of these people's lives, and then make moral judgments on them, make moral judgments on yourself. And I just didn't feel like it was elegant enough to feel like that was pulled off successfully or to really care. So yeah, and there's no real thriller element. It is more about just life and death. What's a good life? What's a good death? So we're still on the hunt for a good thriller. I am reading one right now that I'm enjoying so far, and it has truly one of the most horrific covers I've ever seen. Okay, next is To the Moon by Jang Ryujin, translated by Shaun Halbert. And this one has been catching my eye at the bookstore and at the library for so long. And I finally just got it from the library. And I'm so glad that I did get to it now. Not a popular book internationally. It was a best-selling Korean phenomenon. But I think otherwise, like, it must really just be published in the UK and Australia. It must not really have like a wide release in the US because there's barely any ratings for this on Goodreads, but I've seen it so many times in bookstores and in the library in Australia. So I don't know what's going on, why people are not picking up this book, because I mean, just as a cover buy, I think this is one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen. Like, and it's so detailed with the actual elements from the story, like the specific dates, and just all of these things are so specific to the story. The opposite of the 5 cover. Horrendous. This I need to make a worst book covers of the year just so I can talk about 5 because okay, we're moving on. We're moving on. It's fine. To the Moon is about 3 female coworkers at this Korean snack confectionery business, and one of them is always on the cutting edge of trying to make money. And she is getting into Ethereum, which is a cryptocurrency. She feels like she already kind of missed the boat on making a ton of money off of Bitcoin, but she's jumping on for Ethereum, and she convinces like the main girl we're following in the story to also do that. And then their other friend is a little bit more skeptical and doesn't really like them talking about it because they become so obsessed with cryptocurrency. I'm obviously very crypto negative for many reasons, namely the like environmental reasons. However, I do think Ethereum specifically has changed to be a little bit more environmentally friendly or less aggressively bad. So I was coming into this like very negative about crypto. And this book doesn't really care if you are positive or negative about crypto. It's really about the relationship between these women with just this specific thing that they become obsessed with. That 2 of these coworkers are making lots of money off of it, but they are also getting addicted to their phones and just refreshing and constantly glued to their phones so much that they're having to pull over the car just to, see a minute by minute update, and it's all they can talk about, and it's like negatively impacting their friendship with their other coworker. And it's really just about the journey that these women are going through, and it's all about the fantasy of like what amount of money would change my life, what amount of money would I know that I was making choices based off of what I actually wanted rather than what I am needed to do in this moment, what I need to do to get by. Would I leave my job? Would I buy fancy cars? Would I buy just like slightly better things? Would I not need anything new at all? So it was really about that fantasy without needing to moralize on crypto either way. And I really appreciated that. I didn't need it to, be like, and crypto's bad. And so all of these women are going to be punished for doing the bad thing, or these women are going to be rewarded for doing the good thing. It's not about that so much. And you see the inkling of why it becomes so addictive, because even when you're reading this, you're like, well, I hope it just keeps going up and up and up for these women because they're getting so excited by it. And it's just gambling. It's just like advanced gambling. And I mean, that is an addictive thing. So while I wouldn't expect this story to be the story, like I think there's like a 5-star book about crypto out there that maybe is a little bit more negative and maybe has a little bit more repercussions. However, I could really appreciate this for what it was, which wasn't trying to be a take on crypto, but just to tell a good story. And that's even what the author's note at the end is about. It's just like that this is her debut novel, and she's like, I just want it to be a good story that whenever you look back on this, you're like, that was good. Like, not even like that was great or that was life-changing, but just that was worth my time. So I really enjoyed this. I'm glad I got to it. And yeah, it surprised me in how neutral it was. And that I wasn't upset that it was neutral, unlike The Compound. Okay, we have a kooky Australian horror novel, kind of. Da Off Takes a Holiday by Shaun Micallef. And Shaun Micallef is, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, he is a long time Australian comedian, but a comedian of like a very regal stature, not quite like Stephen Fry, but he does documentaries on the ABC here, and he has some sort of gravitas to him despite being cheeky. And this book is both very smart and very stupid in truly equal measure. The best way I can describe this book is it's like if Dracula was done by Monty Python, but really does take the form of a Gothic novel, like a traditional Gothic novel in the vein of Dracula or in the vein of Carmilla, something that is really taking it seriously. He's taking the source material so seriously, and he's taking references to all kinds of things so seriously. So many references that I got that were very niche, and so I know that there were so many that I missed, but it's about D'Oth, I assume is how it's pronounced, that he is French in some way. And so instead of death, it's D'Oth. And he has a plantation in Haiti that's run by zombie field workers. He, makes commentary on the English monarchy a lot. Like it what I did appreciate was that it was not trying to take away the problematic elements of the traditional Gothic novel and the politics of those times, but was able to still be like cheeky about it and still be critical of the monarchy and of the British Empire as a whole. Conte Oth is on a worldwide tour that it starts in Haiti. We go to England and France and Russia and Japan. Like he is all over the world doing stuff. And he's really moving at quite a clip here. And so, yeah, obviously much shorter than a traditional Victorian Gothic novel, but I think it lingers for just the right amount of time. It has like, like a young Frankenstein feel to it as well. Very silly, very slapstick at times, but also very, very smart in the kind of references that it's making. It's for a specific type of reader that I hope gets to pick it up. Like if you're not Australian, maybe you'll never hear about this book. I don't know how much it's published worldwide, but if you think that you would like to read a Monty Python Young Frankenstein take on Dracula, I mean, I guess there is like Dracula Alive and Loving It, or Dead and Loving. Oh, I don't remember exactly what that's called, but yeah, kind of like a Mel Brooks feeling to it as well. Worth a read. Worth a read. If nothing else, than for just a silly time. And to my knowledge, people are not really writing novels like this anymore. When they're writing Gothic novels, they're not trying to write them like Bram Stoker. They're trying to write it from a modern sensibility, and this, I mean, has modern sensibilities to it in its commentary, but it feels like a Gothic novel, especially in the beginning, and how it's setting it up and the kind of almost boring elements to it. This was fun, and I'm always happy to have spooky horror Australian books to recommend. Yeah, in horror in the same way that like Dracula would be. Ankami by Debra Dank is another Australian novel, or more specifically, Debra Dank is a Gudanji Wakaja and Kalkadoon woman. I will frequently describe a book as being Australian even when it's written by an Aboriginal author. And I just want to note that some Aboriginal authors do identify as Australian, but some do not. And I try to be mindful of knowing if someone would like to not be referred to as an Australian author. However, I don't always know. So I'm always ready to be corrected in the comments, and I will try to be mindful of that. So, but maybe that's news to you as well, that not all Aboriginal authors identify as Australian, because they didn't choose to. Aboriginal land was never ceded. Like no one opted into being part of the colony. So, but this was a beautiful book. It was on the Stella Prize long list, and I believe the short list as well. And it was about Debra Dank's experiences finding out more about her family and the stolen generation in Australia, where Aboriginal children were taken away from their families and placed with white families as a way of cultural elimination, and finding out that maybe that hit closer to home for her than she knew. But it's just about that in part. It's a lot of different stories from her life and just kind of thinkings on it. And this is not a book that is written to educate white people. Like it is definitely for the community. It is words uplifting in spirit, words of strength, and inspirational in that way, and just about the resilience of country and the resilience of Aboriginal culture. So just a beautiful book, but yeah, not aimed towards me. I feel grateful to get to read from this perspective and learn a little bit more. One thing that I did learn specifically from this is that while all Aboriginal cultures are different, all the peoples are different, that one thing that is a recurring cultural element is like not using the names of the dead to allow for a peaceful transfer of the spirit. And what this book pointed out was that for members of the family that were stolen generation, that they also have to not use their names because their status is unknown, that it's almost like they've died too. Not just that it was cultural elimination, but just the disrespect that was shown to them, that they can't even like use the names of their family members if they don't know the status of them. So that was an interesting thing that I'd never considered before, and yeah, appreciate reading. The Cinder by Ayesha Manazir Siddiqui. This one grew on me as I was reading it. It is about a language center that Anisa Elahi is spending her days writing subtitles for Bollywood films. Her boyfriend Adam introduces her to this language center, very secretive language center where you can get full fluency in any language if you just like stay at this place for a little bit and follow these customs and don't tell anyone about it. Like if you get invited to the center, you can only tell one person. You can tell one person that you'd like to invite to it, but otherwise you can't share it. And she decides she wants to go so that she can learn how to translate more things other than just doing subtitles. It has a slow start to it where I was not really getting into it for a while. The way that I was writing about like her and her boyfriend meeting and up until the time where we go to the center, I wasn't that keen on it, but it really grew on me as it went on into a story that I really like. It's about the politics of language and translation, about cultural appropriation in some way, just about the cultural element of language and ownership over language, and language as it's tied to a body. This cover is like really not the vibe of the book. It's a little bit too out there, whereas like the speculative elements weren't that crazy in this book. Like it was a crazy premise for this like language center, but it didn't really evolve past like that original premise in the speculative arena, that it was more about these questions of language and politics. And I don't know, I can't really explain why it grew on me, because nothing was really wowing me on the page to page level, but at the end I was like, you know what, that was a solid novel. I liked thinking about language. There's not I mean, I love linguistics, so it is something that I think about frequently, but I haven't read a book about language like this before, and I enjoyed it. Not something that I feel like I need to widely recommend, but if you are interested in linguistics and you like reading a speculative novel, I think that you might like it. And it's time for my nail inspo, Yesteryear. Don't look at my nail that I broke. But yeah, I think that I did okay at getting the grass and blue and goldenrod shades to it. Not quite a 5-star read for me, but one of the best books that I read this month. Yesteryear, the book of the moment, Caro Claire Burke, and I think kind of deserved to be a book of the moment. However, I didn't really read any of the discourse around it, and I feel like there might have been some kind of weird discourse around it because the book was a lot more nuanced than I expected it to be. The book is about this tradwife influencer who's like, barefoot in the kitchen vibes, a whole gaggle of children, the husband who's outside getting his hands dirty like a real man while she's inside baking and looking also very elegant. And she's also making a lot of money being an influencer, selling cookware, etc. Until one day she wakes up and she's in this distorted version of reality that looks kind of like her life, feels kind of like her life, but different. And it seems to be set in the days of yesteryear, that suddenly she has no modern conveniences and she's having to like actually go do stuff and actually take care of her children, and there's no nannies and there's no producer, and she's failing at making her sourdough, and everything is disgusting, and she spends all day washing clothes, and it's horrible. And it goes back and forth. From the beginning, it tells you that her influencer life is the past and that this yesteryear life is the present. You don't know exactly why that's going on. I think if you've read enough stories or seen enough movies that have like a premise of someone like waking up in a different time, that if you will come up with some reason why this might happen. It's not a totally unfamiliar idea of like how this actually came to be. So it's really more about the journey, I think, about looking at her past life as this influencer and seeing all of the life events that led to her getting to this point, being born at a in a poor Christian household, a single mother household in Idaho, in rural Idaho. And she takes her convictions really seriously about religion and about what she wants out of life. And she's a very passionate woman. I kind of expected this book to feel almost like, um, revenge on this woman, that we have decided as a culture that this trad wife influencer must be punished and that this book would be a book of punishing her for being so horrible. However, it was really a lot more nuanced than that because it allowed her to shine as being someone who had passions and was really convicted about things, and how she got from these real convictions and how she was going about her life making decisions that aligned with her philosophies, and how she got to be, selling mass produced stuff on her Instagram and having nannies and producers, and like how did those ideas ever align. And so seeing that full journey, and it talks about so many other things in here. I tabbed so many times, like I may or may not do a full review still. I would really have to get my ideas together and look at all my tabs again. But it talks about so many different political ideas about the manosphere and radicalization of men on the internet, and also is sympathetic towards her, that just because she had these convictions also doesn't mean that women, want to be subjugated, that, it's not like she longed to be blow her husband and to be subjugated to what he said was right, that it's not easy for any women anywhere along the political spectrum to succeed, and that they're always pushing it against misogyny, but that it might look different. I really think that this is more about that exploration of political ideas than it is about, the mystery of it. I was interested in the mystery of it, but like I said, like, you kind of have some idea of what might be going on and how we might have gotten to this point, but the way that it happened is very sad at times, and I think was surprising. And yeah, mostly I was just wowed by the level of nuance and that it became such a popular book. I'm kind of curious what people are saying about it, but also one of those things where I think that it might I might be better off not knowing and just coming up with my own ideas about it, because yeah, I feel like the discourse might not be uh of a high standard. I think people probably wanted to see her punished more, or that she got what she deserved. This one, I think, was more sensitive to class politics than other books talked about today. So, and next, I finish up my arc of Japanese Gothic by Kylie Baker. This one was one of my most anticipated horror reads of the year, and it did not disappoint. And I loved Bad Eater, gave it 5 stars. This one is kind of more like a 4.5. I probably could have given it 5 stars, but these books could not be more different. Bad Eater was so of the moment of the pandemic, and so urban, set in New York City, the threat of people all around you. It was so much about this urban horror element, as well as like having like these spiritual elements and having ghost and racism on top of the virus. And Japanese Gothic just could not be a bigger departure because this is a historical horror. It is dual timeline where it is current day, but it is also from a little bit past the time of the samurai. That the samurai are really their time is over, but there's this one family clinging to the ideals. And I loved both sides of the story, but really the historical setting was my favorite part, and the relationship of these two characters that have lived in the same house in Japan and that they are somehow connected to each other through this house. This girl who was the daughter of a samurai who had such high expectations for her and was really implementing the way of the samurai on her, to the detriment of their family and to being loved. And it was like this clinging to history, to a fake history that you see in fascism in Japan, also in the United States. And I hate to tell you, it is something to do with all men thinking about the Roman Empire thing, that return to history. There's an element there that is, let's look into that more. What is that about? But just this over idealization of a time when men were what they were supposed to be, and that there is a right way to be and a right code to follow, etc. And then our boy young man in the present day is also having like significant issues, significant mental health issues. He's lost his mom, his dad is weird, home life is weird. He has left college because he's done something bad, and both of our characters are so messed up in a way that is so compelling, and the story and how they connect to each other despite having all of these differences in their upbringing, obviously, because one is a ghost from 1800s Japan. But yeah, the characters were great, the history was great. Kylie Baker, this was like the month for interesting author's notes at the end. There's this author's note at the end talking about how where Kylie Baker's family came from in Japan was a minority group in Japan. So she's like a minority group in Japan and then minority group also in the US. And there was something interesting there. I need to look more into that history. I think Okinawan, I think is what it was. But yeah, definitely more history to learn there. And I'm trying to speed up now because I've been yapping for so long. The sun is going down rapidly. So before I'm in the pitch black, let me talk to you about my best book of the month, which was Molka by Monica Kim. I did do a full review of this one, so I don't think that I need to yap too long about it. But if you're unfamiliar with Molka, it is a horror novel, a new release horror novel that is also set in Korea, and that is about this Korean phenomenon of secret cameras secretly, without consent, recording women in bathrooms in hotels, for the pleasure, power abuse from men, that are either used for private use, on sold on the internet, all kinds of reasons. But yeah, it is like ends up being a revenge good for her type of story that is, I think, very fulfilling, and also has like another horror genre eke into it that's kind of a surprise in the final third that I think was done very well, that wasn't given away in the synopsis, so it was interesting. There are all kinds of evil men in the story, and evil in different ways. One is her coworker who's obsessed with her because she was cordial to him, which means that she must actually be in love with him, and he has secret cameras in the bathroom recording them. So we hate him. Her boyfriend is this son of a business magnate, and we find out that he is up to evil things and has lots of secrets to unpack. I would go watch my specific review video for this if you're interested in learning about this more, because I unpack in there what makes a good for her novel, because so many of them are flops for me, and I think that are trying to be like girl power, but end up being like misogynistic. This one is not that. It is so good. The writing style is so compelling, so addictive. I flew through this in basically one sitting, and she just has like the most gripping writing style. I can't wait to read what she writes next because I loved this 5 stars, and I gave 5 stars to The Eyes Are the Best Part, which was my best horror novel of 2 years ago, I guess. And yeah, so, a great month for horror, a great month for kind of visiting all over the world in my reading, both translated lit and also just books that take you all over the world. And as far as reading goals, I read 5 physical books, one nonfiction, and two Aussie books. So, not too bad. But I have been talking for entirely too long, which wouldn't be an issue except for the light is vanishing. So I will leave you with this. So chat with me down in the comments. Tell me what your best book of May was. Tell me what you are reading in June. I can't wait to chat with you, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.